Hello, DeLand. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you're doing well during this challenging time. This is Chris Graham, Public Information Officer for the City of DeLand. Joining me today are Mike Sibley, Managing Partner for the Daytona Beach and DeLand locations for James Moore and Company. We also have Nick Conte, the city's Economic Development Manager. Thank you both for joining me for this conversation today.
Good to be here, Chris.
Thank you for having us.
Today, we're going to talk briefly about some assistance that is available to individuals and small business owners as we go through the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think very relevant given that 1 in 10 of our workforce is now filed for unemployment. So let's get right into it. Mike, a lot of individuals and small business owners are really struggling right now, but there's a lot of resources available. What are some programs business owners should be looking at to seek help? And what are you seeing as the most relevant programs for people right now?
All right, sure. Thanks, Chris. I'm glad to be able to have the opportunity to bring this to the DeLand community. There is a lot of programs out there right now. There are programs that are in process. They're being developed and implemented and processed all at the same time. So unfortunately, everyone's going to have a little bit of patience as the banks, the government, even their financial advisors and CPAs help them work through these issues to make sure they're maximizing their benefit, really. But there are several programs available, and probably the one that's getting the most amount of press at this point is the Payroll Protection Program. This was part of the CARES Act, which was passed just over a week ago now, probably about a week and a half ago. And it's in the process. Banks started accepting applications as early as last Friday, and banks continued to add their ability to accept applications over the weekend and into this week. I know there's some banks that are still working through the process to be able to accept applications. But what the Payroll Protection Program is, it's a forgivable loan, almost akin to a grant for businesses that are eligible. And to be eligible, you have to be what's called a small business. And the definition, it varies depending on certain factors, but most widely, if you're below 500 employees, you're considered a small business. But you may be above 500 and be a franchise. And certain franchises and restaurants and hotels can also apply for this grant, this loan that turns into a grant. Okay, so first eligibility is to be a small business. The second thing is you've got to, the only real requirement is that you face some uncertainty as it relates to the current economic environment, okay, which virtually every business does. And one of the questions that I often get is, well, I've got reserves to get through this right now, and I think I can make it through. Well, Congress's intent was not to require somebody to use up all of their reserves. The intent of this program is to keep people employed, and then it covers an 8-week period of payroll. And at the end of that payroll period, or that 8-week time, that hopefully business is getting back to normal, and they don't have to rehire employees and try to find employees, that their business is ready to go as soon as all of these restrictions are lifted and people can get back into things. Hopefully it will only be another 8 weeks or so. So there's no bright line test on what economic uncertainty means. It's just something you have to self-certify that you face it with it, and you do not have to use the reserves. The way the Payroll Protection Program loan works is that it maxes out at 2.5 times your monthly average payroll. So if you take your payroll for all of 2019 and divide it by 12, that's your monthly average, and you multiply that by 2.5 times, and that's your maximum loan. And that loan covers 8 weeks of payroll. About 75% of that loan is used on payroll, and the remaining is used on rent and utilities. And utilities are your electric, your gas, your telephone, your internet. I mean, it really covers some of the basic overhead items for the company. Now, it also covers those who are 1099. In other words, they receive 1099s. It covers sole proprietors and those who are self-employed. And there's a lot of confusion about the self-employed at this point because they're not supposed to be able to start applying till tomorrow is the understanding that's out there right now. Banks have not necessarily geared themselves up for that just yet, from what I understand. And so there's not a lot of guidance on what do you have to do as somebody who's self-employed. We have our basic thought processes just based on reading the bill. But there's been even some instances where some of our clients have been told, as a self-employed person, you can't apply at all. That's not the case. That's an incorrect rumor out there on that. You will be able to apply. It's just a matter for the time period to open up. There's $350 billion devoted to this program right now. I know everybody's worried about it running out of money. A lot of banks are still just in the process. So my recommendation is you need to apply for this program, but get your things in order that are needed. So that way you can get right in the queue. You don't have to worry about it being sent back for additional items. So that this program is very, very important because it is forgivable. All of that will be forgivable, and the debt forgiveness from this is not something you're going to include in your taxable income next year. Tremendous program. The next one that I hear that people ask a lot about is the economic injury disaster loan. That's through the SBA. You apply on the SBA.gov website. That is separate from the payroll protection program, which has to be applied for through a bank. So there's two different programs. The EIDL, the economic injury disaster loan, when you apply for it, it's up to $2 million. You've got to meet the requirements on there, but there's a $10,000 grant that's allowed for right off from the beginning. If you qualify, you can apply for both at the same time. That's another question we get a lot of. You can apply for them both. If you've already gotten one and it's approved and you've gotten funded for it, you can actually roll that into the payroll protection program as part of the max on top of the 2.5 times. Okay, there's also the Florida Bridge Loan. Many people I know of were applying for that right away to get some cash flow in the door. And then, of course, the CARES Act has other provisions in it for employee retention credits and some other pieces of tax incentives that actually allow you to go back in certain circumstances and amend your tax returns in the past to get some refunds. We're still trying to work through and learn all the different components of that, but there's a lot of complexities in there, and you really do need to talk to your advisor on how that applies to you. I know on the individual level, there's been questions about unemployment. There's ways to file paper as opposed to online. I know the state of Florida is working on trying to free that up. One of the things that has come to light as part of this is if you're self-employed, you can apply for unemployment. It's something that I believe is relatively new, but you can apply for self-employment now. And of course, the stimulus checks at some point will hopefully make their way out for those who are in the income levels. The IRS is going to direct deposit those, and in some cases, if they don't have the direct deposit, they will send checks. The direct deposit is apparently is going to be a much faster way to obviously get the cash in your bank account. But I think they're still really trying to work through the logistics of getting that money out to everybody.
That's very, very informative. Thank you, Mike. As far as just a quick follow-up, is there any sort of paperwork, like specifically, that you would recommend that people have in hand when they apply for these things?
Yes. So you can download one of the applications, and some banks have their own applications that they're asking people to fill out. So there is to some degree bank specific, but you can download the application through the SBA. So you can have that completed. It's 2 pages. It's very simple. You're going to want your payroll records for 2019, your 941s, which are your payroll tax returns for each quarter, your annual 940. You're going to want, some banks are asking for just the payroll register closest to February 15th. So this program applies for businesses who are in operation February 15th, 2020. So they're asking for a first quarter payroll register or a payroll register as close to February 15th as possible. They're also asking for things like front and back copies of the owner's driver's licenses. They're asking for articles of incorporation, copies of bylaws. They want to make sure that you're an actual business that's in operation. You can think about the amount of fraud that could come through this. So they're asking for those on top of that. I've seen different things like questionnaires about what's your business value, some different things like that. But if you get your payroll records for 2019, including your W-2s, your 941s, your 940, your payroll register for the first quarter, your articles of incorporation, your bylaws. If you're a partnership, get your operating agreement together, have all of those things together. And really what the bank is going to do is they want to see your existence. They want to be able to take that calculation and tie it into your payroll records.
So it sounds like you want to have a lot of documents for sure.
Yes. And I guess on top of that, your most recently filed tax returns as well.
That's very helpful. I hope our businesses are finding this informative. So Nick, just specifically for DeLand, what are you seeing with our small businesses, and what are some local resources we're trying to give to our businesses?
Good morning. The important thing, Mike's touched on it a lot, is the fact this is such a fluid situation that, literally before we started recording, there were still some negotiations going on the floor of the Senate to change some of this, some of the wording that's in the PPP or the SBA loan there. So, Mike, you got your hands, you're going to have your hands full just trying to sort that out for a while. For us, what we're trying to do, Chris, is make sure that we have at least a place where people can come in and get this information as quickly as they can. Resourcing just the City of DeLand website on the very front page. There, you don't have to do any drill downs. Front page. There's a rotating number of pages, many of which are going to basically be just COVID-19 business recovery resources. They're going to state much of the stuff that Mike has already detailed and will be discussing at a future date as well. And then there are other local resources, which are the banks that are actually going to have to do this work for the Paycheck Protection Program. And they're listed. The DeLand Chamber of Commerce upstairs put together a list of the local lenders that are working on this project. And, they have, obviously, as Mike pointed out, some of their own checklists that you're going to need to have ready to go see them. Those are all up on our city website. It can be accessed under the Business Recovery Resources page. At the local level, the thing that I guess I'm most hopeful of, it's going to be glass half full for what we're trying to do. It's unprecedented. There isn't a book to look at for this one. Everybody's writing their own chapter pretty much every day on this. I love seeing the fact that there's businesses out there that they're struggling on the retail end, the restaurant end, and they're asked to reinvent what it is they're supposed to be. On the dime, they were asked to basically stop letting people come in, basically switch everything that you've been doing, and basically try to then monetize that. And they've still had time to set up a number of their own GoFundMe accounts for these efforts. We have a page basically on the website as well. It's just the Save Our Businesses donations page. A number of interests are on there. There's a Save Our Downtown DeLand Restaurants section. Chris, you were instrumental in that. Support our downtown DeLand bartenders, which has been done by a number of outstanding leaders we've got in the community. And even now the Save the Athens Theater GoFundMe page has popped up. So I'm always intrigued by what happens when a community is challenged, and certainly one that nobody's ready for. And I can tell you that from conversations anyway, people are just plugging away. I think it's not like what's going to happen 8 weeks from now. That's what Mike's got to think about, and others. They're thinking about maybe 8 hours from now. Just to keep those goals shorter till we get through phase 1, and then we'll get to phase 2 as to whatever that is when we do. There's discussions, as Mike will talk about in his session next time we speak. There's discussion that there's going to be a House bill as well that may add to some of this other stimulus as well, and hopefully it's something that I'm hoping anyway comes back out of it that a small business that's just literally starting out can kind of get into. A lot of this is daunting. If you're an established business, you know how to do this. If you're not, it's can be overwhelming pretty fast. So we're trying to demystify that, I hope, by bringing these resources together. Chris, I commend you for doing this part of it, and that we'll continue a community conversation on this.
Right. And I think, we are definitely in a challenging time. I've likened it to a 6-month hurricane where, last month we had the preparation phase. Now we're in the event stage where it's coming through our communities, and, our businesses are being affected. And, next month, June, we're going to have the recovery phase. So I think these resources are going to be really good for our businesses. I hope you found this informative. And Mike and Nick, thank you for joining me for this discussion. Is there anything you guys have to add?
I would just add, for everybody just to reach out and contact their advisor. This stuff is changing. There's more guidance coming out, it seems, every day. As Nick mentioned, you've got our government's working on different bills and add-ons and things like that. But the best thing they can do is reach out and ask for help. This is the time that they need to be relying on and try to get the best information that they can, because there are a lot of things out there for them.
And I know this is going to be kind of, I guess, an ongoing conversation, Chris. We're going to be having this discussion, I believe, at some point next week. Mike, I think you're going to be a guest as part of this ongoing conversation, because who knows what that might look like by next week. I'm sure there's going to be some new pieces to discuss at that point.
Yeah, there's definitely a bunch of pieces that are still falling into place. And yes, if we didn't answer your question today, we are going to be having a broader discussion with the panel next week. Mike has agreed to join us, and we're hopefully have some other community members on our panel to address questions and concerns from the community. If you do have a question that you'd like answered, we're asking them for people to pre-submit them. So if you have a question, please send an email to delandpio@gmail.com. Again, that's delandpio@gmail.com. We'll try to answer your questions. It will be a live session, so we will be monitoring questions as they come in. We'll try to answer them as best as possible. Again, thank you guys for joining us. We hope everyone found this informative, and we'll be back next week with more on how individuals and businesses can get assistance.
Take care.
Thanks, Chris.